Now, I had quite a busy weekend, but not as busy as the members of the National Party. They had their first National Party conference as a government, I suppose. And, not many surprises. Hitting the usual marks, I suppose, but with analysis of, not just the party, but the conference. Political commentator Dr. Bryce Edwards joins us. Bryce, kia ora. Good morning.
Morena, Andrew.
So, as a political pundit, were you just watching the conference all weekend, live feeds and all that type of stuff, or did you have quite a good weekend?
I also have a bit of a family life. So no, I did read everything that came out.
Glad to hear it, though. But yeah.
No live streams.
No, that's good. In some ways, I suppose, no surprises, but this is... look, taking nothing away from it, it is a bit of a rah-rah event. It is an opportunity to rally the troops, as it were, to create some, or to generate some enthusiasm from the National Party faithful and those who are actually the National Party MPs at the moment. Do you think it was successful in that aim, Bryce?
Oh, look, absolutely. What political parties want from their annual conferences is to get a few headlines, especially on the 6 p.m. Sunday news at the end of it all, with some announcement that kind of resonates with the public. And they don't want any bad news to come out of the conference. They don't want scandals. They don't want stories about infighting and debates and disagreements And so none of that happened. A very successful conference. Overall, I think, it's kind of what you expected from this conference. It's the first one, as you say, for National once they're back in power. Mm-hmm. They had a lot to celebrate. It was a case of the caucus coming and reminding members, activists about what they are achieving, where they're going, and to rah-rah the troops. And really it was something of a rally more than a conference. So I'm old enough to go back to the sort of maybe even the 1970s, 1980s, where conferences were a bit different for political parties. They tended to debate lots of things, and they had remits, and the conferences actually had a lot of power. They would decide the direction of the party. They would decide on policies and manifestos. None of that was happening really. In the weekend, I think the most controversial thing was when one more older member took issue with the government talking about granny flats, and I think she wanted a change of language to senior citizen units or something.
Which means granny flats, just with the gift of translation in that regard. One thing that I thought, I mean, I didn't watch it live, but I've watched clips from it since then. It kind of looked more like a campaign rally than it did a party conference. And look, don't read anything too bad into this. It was kind of like an American presidential rally. Lots of flags, lots of slogans. It was like they were wanting to get elected all over again and stating their core policies and those sorts of things.
They do want to get re-elected all over again.
Well, they do, but not in the next. And not necessarily in the next couple of months. It was like that they were preaching to the choir.
I think your observation is quite correct. And as I said, that's what they ordered. That's what they wanted. They got what they wanted. I find it a bit disappointing, perhaps, as a pundit who wants a bit more sort of big, bold, juicy stuff to come out of a conference, but also wearing my political science hat, where I think party memberships are incredibly important to political parties, and they do need to have some power to debate things and to decide things rather than just be kind of fodder for the TV cameras. So in that regard, I think it was a bit disappointing.
Because honestly, everybody there is going to be voting National, you would imagine. It's a National Party conference. Who are they trying to convince? Well, perhaps, to the audience of one being the television news camera rather than the people in the room. Now, as I said, hitting the normal marks, let's be tough on crime. Let's, make sure that we put the message out there, more police on the beat. We're hiring more nurses and those sorts of things. Probably the big winner of the conference was in the education space, and that's probably one of the hardest nuts to crack for the government in this term.
Yes, and The Prime Minister, Christopher Luxon, is particularly passionate about education, and he really wants this government to crack that nut and to, yes, be seen as fixing what they see as a crisis in the education system. So his speech on Sunday, he announced this new policy around mathematics, around the curriculum, and I think it's been incredibly well received. Of course, there's been people disagreeing with elements of it, but by and large, it's been successful. He talked about this new survey result of year 8 children, so pretty much the last year of primary or intermediate, and the fact that 22% of them are meeting expectations of what the system says they should be.
Which is a shocking statistic even for somebody who failed School C Maths. And putting my hand up in that regard, I passed the second time. I got 52, so that's a pass. However, I did love the fact that Christopher Luxon also pointed out, for those people like me that did fail School C Maths, that 22% means about 1 in 5.
Yes.
So for us maths fails, he brought us into the room, which I thought was bold of him to do that.
Look, and he's a good communicator, absolutely, in that regard. So I think they've picked a winner here. They've received this report last month. They've thrown it out to New Zealand and said, look, there's a crisis here. And then they have a policy to fix it straight away, which is a new curriculum, structured mathematics, which was looking like it was going to be brought in for 2026. They are bringing it in 1 year earlier. They're putting more funding into it. And in a sense, I think parents will receive this well. Labour weren't able to disagree with it because it's basically their policy as well. And so Chris Hipkins was left saying, oh, we kind of agree with this. It's good. We would do it too. So utterly successful. I mean, we might have some arguments about what that survey meant, and I see some educationalists kind of disagreeing with it, and there's some debate about whether the structured maths is the right way forward. But there's no doubt there's a bit of a consensus that there is a problem and something needs to be done.
Certainly, and quite bluntly, you can't argue the maths. The survey data is in, and 1 out of 5 is an absolutely shocking result, regardless of what you're measuring, actually. So I suppose everybody in the room, as you say, knows that we must do better in this. And this is, as you say, it's fantastic for the government because they can say, look what happened under the last lot, and it's very difficult for the opposition to put up any excuses and do anything but agree. You touched on something which I think is the tough part of this equation, to use a maths metaphor, if I can. And that is to get all of the educationalists to agree on the best way of doing this. I think generally the police department agrees that there should be less crime. I think generally the health department agrees that there should be better health access to people that need it. But in the education sector, there is some strong ideological frameworks about the way in which education should be done. Despite evidence that this isn't necessarily successful, these people are in key positions within the organisations, and they're not necessarily going to swallow whole the new policies of the government.
Look, it's a bit hard for me to comment on that. I'm seeing some of the debates from educationalists, and some agree, some don't, and I certainly can't. I have trouble interpreting or adjudicating on who's right and who's wrong. I mean, yes, you're always going to have debate, and that's a healthy thing. Some teachers are sort of complaining that this is going to be too much work for us, etc., which might well be true. But again, we kind of expect that to be said. But the gist of it, I think there is general agreement on it, and I've got no doubt that parents will be quite convinced that the government at least is doing something, trying something, and and that's what will convince most people.
And honestly, creating the impression that progress is being made on things that New Zealanders care about. They're feeling safe in their communities, knowing that they can have access to health care if they need it, and that their children are going to be educated. If you can certainly create the impression that you care about this and you're progressing it, that's what you need to get elected again, right?
Oh, look, absolutely. And people, especially in the political sphere, often forget how important those things are. And we end up, I don't know, arguing around use of te reo language or road cones or whatever that really don't affect people on a day-to-day basis in the same way that people really do care about their kids failing school and not being able to get jobs, or not being, achieving at their optimal level. So I think this is a no-brainer for National to go down there. And I don't think people shift their votes a lot on things like the treaty, and there's some big ferocious debates going on there. But things on education, absolutely they do.
Of course, it is one thing to have everybody clap and cheer when you're in a room of National Party supporters, right? This is a solid audience. The challenge, I suppose, for the government is they need to take these policies back into the House. They need to debate them and argue them both in the House and in select committee. They need to push this through in terms of legislation, and they need to get the results that I suppose matches the rhetoric by the time we come to the end of the election cycle.
Yeah, and we have a good political system or process so that this can be tested in the House. And yes, we will have Labour, Greens, Te Pāti Māori that will be pointing out any shortcomings, any problems, both within the debating chamber and in the select committees. And we'll have the education unions and various lobby groups that will put in their 2 cents and and maybe iron out some of the problems or point to a better way. Whether or not it changes things before the next election is a bigger question. It's a bit like turning around an oil tanker. It can't just get results quickly. It will take a while, and we won't really know, sadly, for a few years about whether this is the right approach.
And hey, from the Green Party's point of view, why are we turning around oil tankers in the first place? But that's a conversation for another day. Bryce, appreciate your comments, your insight. Thanks very much for joining us once again.
Okay, thanks, Andrew.
Hey, thanks very much for joining us in the Rhema studio. Thanks very much for watching the interview. It's kind of nice to have an audience, actually. And if you did like what you watched, then do give us a like, do give us the thumbs up. And if you'd like to see more interviews like that one, or perhaps even better, subscribe and those interviews will come straight to you. Don't forget to turn on your notifications, and we'll see you in the next one. Cheers.